Welcome to Art Masters with me, Mrs. Portilla. Today we are going to be learning about one artist for Art Masters. We're going to learn a little bit of history about this artist. We're going to see some slides of their work, and we're going to see a little glimpse of what this month's art project will be. Today we're going to talk about a special birthday celebration story that took place over 100 years ago in a small village in northern Russia. This is about Marc Chagall. Life in the village was cold and harsh, but the people were friendly. There were many tiny wooden houses called izbas. An izba is a small house built from the wood of fir trees and found in the countryside. In this village was the tiniest izba of all, where a man and his wife lived who were expecting their first baby. On July 7, 1887, their baby was born, but something was wrong. He wasn't breathing and was very pale. They finally dipped him into cold water, and at last he gave a cry. The baby lived, and they decided to call him Marc Chagall. But suddenly they heard the cries of fire, fire. The small village of wooden houses was on fire. Everyone had to leave. The baby was put into a wooden box and carried away to safety. This is how Marc Chagall's life began. It wasn't until he was much older and moved to Paris that he changed his name to a more artistic Marc Chagall. Later, his father bought a bigger house and was joined by 8 brothers and sisters. It was a busy family life with many chores to do, but once in a while, Marc would find time to do what he enjoyed more than anything else, painting and drawing. Marc Chagall was 26 when he painted the first painting you will see. Many people believe this painting is about Chagall's birth. How do we know so much about Chagall's life? Well, he wrote a book called My Life. He wrote about the town he lived in as a child and how it looked. He wrote how the narrow, muddy streets were and the tiny wooden houses that caught fire so easily. He liked to write about his family. In school, his favorite subjects were geometry, drawing, and story time. He was an excellent dancer, he had a beautiful singing voice, and he wrote beautiful poems. One day, a friend showed him a drawing. Chagall had never seen a drawing before. He went right to the library and found pictures to make drawings of. Soon his room was filled with drawings. When a visitor saw them and said, "You're a real artist, aren't you?" Chagall knew what he wanted to be. He wanted to become an artist. Of course, Chagall's parents did not want him to study art. They knew he would have to travel far away. They knew he would have to earn money for art school, and it would be a struggle. But Chagall had made up his mind. He studied in Russia, and then he went to Paris to learn to be a painter. In Paris, Chagall saw realistic paintings. He saw abstract paintings. He saw bright colors. He loved what he saw. He used everything he saw in his paintings. What looks realistic in this painting? The large head, Chagall's own head. The village with its rows of tiny houses and temples, a farmer and his wife, and a girl milking a cow. The real things are from Chagall's memory from his childhood in Russia. He painted those things more realistically. By placing the realistic things in an abstract setting, Chagall has created a dream world. The things that are unrealistic or abstract are the size or the scale of the things, the upside-down house, the upside-down wife, the white cow, the big green face. It seems to be both day and night at the same time. The village is in darkness, but the white makes us think of daylight. Chagall paintings were part abstract and part realistic, but it is the abstract things that give them the dreamlike feeling. Chagall was famous for painting daydreams. When Chagall came to France from Russia, he was overjoyed with the bright light and colors used by the modern painters he met. In Russia, most spent their days painting realistic portraits in dark tones. In France, there were many modern styles of painting, and Chagall tried them all. He tried the Impressionist style in the flying carriage, where he uses dabs of color. He loved the circles of light that the Futurist painters used. And in the next painting, he borrowed some ideas from the Cubist painters. Chagall noticed that some of the painters in Paris were painting only parts of things and combining the parts into interesting paintings. They were called the Cubist painters. What parts of things do you see in this painting? We see an upside-down green head, a blue figure or body, and parts of flowers, food, tablecloths, drapes, and patterns. Do you notice the notebook filled with words and colors? This gives us a clue about the theme or the subject of the painting. A notebook filled with words and colors could only be that of an artist or writer. There are some writers who create art with words called poets. The painting is of a poet friend of Chagall's. The name of the painting is The Poet 3:30. Chagall finished the painting at 3:30 in the morning. You might notice the hands pointing in opposite directions. Poets and artists alike love to show us different ways to look at things. Chagall's poet neighbors in Paris called him the poet. He could write poetry, but his paintings were even more poetic. Has anyone found the artist's signature? If you look at the lower left-hand corner in shades of red and green, you'll see it going up and down. Chagall used different values, like dark and light, of red and green to paint the theme. Can we guess what the theme is? It's based on soldiers. Not one certain soldier, but soldiers in general. This title tells us that soldiers drink. What is unreal or dreamlike in this painting? The colors, the floating hat, the dancers are tiny, the buttons of the uniform seem to float, and through the window it appears to be night, but there's a strange red glow. Chagall was a very kind and loving man. He seemed to like everyone except soldiers. Chagall did not like soldiers at all. For this painting, he drew upon his memory of a war in Russia. Russian families had to let the soldiers live in their houses. There was never enough food, and the soldiers always seemed to eat and drink too much, leaving nothing for Chagall and his brothers and sisters. He painted the soldier with one green and one blue eye. Chagall filled the next painting with things he loved. Let's see the difference. Chagall painted many self-portraits during his life. If you look carefully, you can learn many things about him. Let's see, Chagall had curly hair. He had 7 fingers. Not really. There's an old Jewish saying that if you do something very well, you do it with 7 fingers. Chagall had 2 right hands. Not really, but he could use both hands equally well. The palette tells us that he is an artist, but it also tells us more. If you notice the geometric shapes on the palette, he loved geometry and made it part of each painting. He put triangles and circles on his palette. He put his favorite colors on his palette. He has big eyes. Not really, he's just showing how important it is for artists to see well and look carefully. The things that Chagall included in this painting are like pieces of a puzzle. We can tell that Chagall's background is in Hebrew by looking at the letters on the top. We can look at the Eiffel Tower through the window and tell that Chagall is in Paris. And we might guess what he's thinking by the cloud in the upper right corner of the small village like the town he grew up. He decided to make a painting of the feeling he had about his old Russia and his new Paris. You'll notice the white light seems to have a geometric shape. The things or images in the painting are tied together by this light. This painting looks like a puzzle. There are clues to solving the puzzle if we look closely. Why do we think there's a 2-headed man? Chagall's looking back at Russia and ahead to Paris. He has a heart in his hand because he loves both countries. There's a man and a woman floating in opposite directions. Before Chagall left Russia, he had fallen in love with the daughter of one of the wealthiest families in the village, but her parents did not approve. Marc would have to prove himself as an artist before he could marry Bella. So the 2 figures represent Chagall and Bella. We'll notice that Paris and his village are different. The tall buildings and bright colors of Paris are very different than the tiny, dark houses. At this time in history, thousands of artists from all over the world came to Paris to work and study. Chagall was very talented. He earned money by touching up photographs. He even sold his paintings. He was able to live in the same area as many famous writers, poets, and artists. This was great for his career because the writers often wrote nice articles about Chagall. Everyone began to notice his dreamlike way of painting and his bright and lively colors. He created 40 oil paintings as well as 160 drawings in watercolors. With the help of his poet friend, he found a gallery in Berlin, Germany, that would exhibit them. It was a huge exhibition and a great success. While his paintings were selling in Germany, Chagall left for Russia. His dream had come true. He could actually make a living as an artist. He couldn't wait to share the news with his family and Bella. The next painting is the self-portrait that Chagall painted following his return. Chagall had planned to marry Bella and return to Paris, but in August, World War I broke out and changed everything. Chagall was not allowed to leave, but he was able to find a job working in the War Department so he could marry Bella. This made him very happy. Chagall spent all his free time painting. Soon he became a famous artist in Russia too. This painting is very different from almost all of his other paintings. It does not have the dreamlike quality of the others, and it shows us what he looked like in 1914. It's different from a photograph because there's not a lot of detail, and we can see some brush strokes. We also have a clue that he's worried about the war based on his very serious and thoughtful face. Chagall had an unusually beautiful face, and he liked to put rogue or like blush on his cheeks and lips to make them even redder. He planned to paint all of his village. He worked on his paintings at all hours of days and night. Bella brought him food. One day she put on her best dress and bought him a birthday cake and flowers. But when Chagall saw her in his little studio with the wonderful present, he made her hold very still until he sketched this painting. Then they ate the cake. Do we think Chagall's little studio was really this colorful? No, he painted the bright colors to show his happy feelings. He added patterns on some of the things and left some others plain for balance. He's showing happiness by the floating figures, the bright colors, and he's done some very clever things to show this floating feeling. He shows us the top of the stool, the rug, the cake, and the carpet. And things from the side, he's showing the table, the bed, and the window. It's a very odd perspective, not realistic. In addition to showing different views, Chagall also liked to change the scale or the size. He has made the violinist larger than the houses, so he scaled the violinist up. The violin player was always a part of the Jewish celebrations that Chagall remembered. His uncle played the violin from the rooftop of his tiny wooden house. Every birthday would bring him to the rooftop to play the violin. This would make his uncle seem very big to the children of the village, so Chagall painted him as he remembered him as a child. If Chagall had painted him to scale or the correct size, the feeling of the painting wouldn't have been the same. The large fiddler makes the house seem smaller and the music seem bigger. He's also used the brightest colors on the fiddler to make him seem important. Chagall felt that the color green gives off a happy feeling and makes him look magical. We'll notice the brightest color is the orange violin. He made it the most important thing in the painting. And orange is a warm color that makes it come forward. Instead of using a bright warm color for the most important thing in the next painting, he used blue. The blue was giving us a feeling of cool, cold ice and sadness. Chagall has painted this tiny izba in shade of blue because this is not a happy home. The war, the revolution, and the communists have changed his city. When the war ended, Chagall gave up painting and worked full-time. The new government wanted to use art to spread its political beliefs. Chagall soon realized the artists would not be free to paint what they chose in Russia. So he left and vowed he would never return. Then one day a letter arrived that changed Chagall's life. It was from a friend in Germany asking if he was alive. It seemed everyone had thought that when Chagall left and never came back, it was because he had died in the war. The letter went on to say that Chagall was really famous in Germany. His pictures were selling for very high prices, so he decided to return to Paris. When Chagall and Bella arrived, there were a few surprises. Over the 9 years he was gone, all of his paintings and drawings were stolen. In Germany, the money from his art gallery sales were gone. Chagall had nothing to show for his years of hard work in Russia and Paris. Chagall decided to make copies of the paintings that had been lost. Some, like the green violinist, he painted exactly as they were. Some paintings he changed slightly. This is the new version of I and the Village. He named it Peasant Life. This one seems to be a little bit of a happier painting. Chagall picked a very happy theme for this. We'll notice the farmer is smiling in the foreground with his white horse, giving him a snack. The background, there's a family grouped around the table with dancers and a carriage with 2 riders. You could tell these people love each other. Love was to become Chagall's most favorite theme to paint. His time in Paris was filled with painting, drawing, and traveling with Bella and his daughter Ida. He became one of the most respected and admired painters in Europe and became a citizen of France. But once again, his life was changed by war. World War II forced him out of his new home. He fled to America with many other poets and artists among them, including Matisse and Picasso. Once in New York, he continued to make his dream-like paintings. One of the first paintings he made in New York was The Juggler. The theme of this painting is the circus. We can tell it's the circus because we see the lady acrobat on the swing, and the circus ring with the audience. There's also memories of his childhood village. When his daughter Ida was young, he had taken her to the circus every week. He loved how it created a magical world. Chagall had created many paintings about the circus in France. He often included flying clocks in his world. You'll notice it's draped over the acrobat's arm like a towel. Chagall's dreamlike paintings were a success in New York. Once again, he was famous and admired. But once again, tragedy struck. News from Russia was terrible. The homes and lives of his Jewish friends in Russia were ruined. The war in France was horrible. But even worse, his wife Bella suddenly died from a sickness. He was overcome with sadness, and he couldn't pick up a brush for almost a year. When he finally returned to painting, his bright colors changed to darker values. As soon as the war was over, he returned to Paris. It seemed like Paris was his true home. He bought a small home in a small town in south of France where he worked among the flowers, fruit, and the countryside. But what is the theme you think he chose? Could it be love once again? His daughter Ida had introduced him to Valentine Brodsky, a Russian-born woman of beauty and wit. Chagall spent the rest of his life with her. He was 67 years old when he completed this painting. Most people are retired by then, but Chagall continued to paint. He filled large new canvases with his love for nature, animals, dance, music, and the circus. He mastered many new techniques like lithography that more people could afford to buy. The next slide is a lithograph, or a print, that he created in a gallery in Paris. To create this lithograph, he drew the image on a special slab of limestone. Then his assistants took over the job. They used special chemicals to make a drawing stick. They applied ink with a roller so that it stuck only to the lines. Finally, a sheet of paper was placed on the stone and pressed, so it made a copy of the drawing that was transferred in reverse on the paper. A separate stone had to be made for each color, but the final print was of a very fine quality and could be sold as a work of art, kind of like ink stamps. Chagall then went on to create huge materials for the Paris Opera House. He continued to create sets and costumes for the theater. He created ceramic plates and vases and sculptures. He even mastered the technique of stained glass. In America, the Art Institute of Chicago hired him to create the America windows. Chagall was grateful for all America had done for him during the war, so his work on this project was a joy. He worked with two master glassmakers from France who layered colors within the glass. The glassmakers loved working with Chagall and made sure that every color they used was true to his design. Chagall worked on the design first in paint and paper, and then he scaled it up to the glass. He designed each panel or section of the window with a theme. The two panels in the next slide are about music and art. He loved working in stained glass. One reason was he was able to use the geometric shapes in his design. He has some rectangles and squares, and he repeated the straight lines throughout the design to tie it all together. He also loved the color in stained glass. He used mostly blue. The America windows were finally put into place in the Art Institute when Chagall was 90 years old. In the years that followed, he continued to work. In 1985, there was a huge exhibit in London that included works from every step in his career. 7 days before it closed, Chagall died at his home in the south of France. He was 97 years old. Chagall was a poet-painter who painted dreams and wishes. In Paris, he invented his own unique style, mixing dreams with Russian village life. So today we will be creating our own dream-like village of Russia using oil pastels and geometric shapes. It's going to be a little bit abstract and dreamlike. So I hope you're looking forward to this month's art project.